as we continue to work with transparency settings, the concept of track matting bubbles up really fast to the top. Now, what is track matting? We have seen in modes that we have the ability to create stencils by using alpha information in files. So in this case, we have this image that has the logo, and remember, we have transparency all around that image. Now, if I were to change the mode on that layer by going into the mode dropdown and choosing stencil alpha, basically I'm cutting like a cookie cutter across all of the layers that are below it so that everything outside it becomes transparent, and I only see the areas that have been defined by the alpha channel. Now, if I change the background color of my composition and I access the settings by pressing Control K on the keyboard, I can go ahead and change the background color of my composition, let's say, and you will notice that I have transparency all the way in the background. So that is one way to create a cookie cut outside using an alpha channel. But if I want to place something in the background of this thing, if I went ahead and dropped this image back there, you notice that the image is not visible in the background. And that is because that stencil alpha is cutting right through all the layers. And that's not what we want to use. Actually, as I said in the video before, I never use this. I have used this probably once in the last 15, 20 years. So I really don't use this mode at all. To me, it's useless because it's not what it's there for a reason. It's never gone away. So I'm pretty sure there must be a use for it. I just don't find a use for it because when I want to cut things into an alpha piece of information, it's because I want to drop them on top of something else. And when I want to do that, then I use the track matte mode. So what is track matte? Let me remove that clouds layer once again, and let me undo that mode on the stencil alpha. So now we have set up here these three images behind that title, and that title has alpha information as you saw a second ago. It is the transparency that through which we see the letters, and everything else is transparent. So now what I want to do is I want to make use of that alpha information to cut right through and only see those items behind it inside that alpha information, and then be able to place that image of clouds behind everything else. So how do we go about doing this? Well, first things first, I need to make these three layers below or behind my track matte, which is what that would be called, the track matte. So behind that track matte, those three layers need to be pre-composed so that I only have one layer available. So I will go ahead and select all three layers, and then I will pre-compose them by going layer, pre-compose, or Control-Shift-C, which is the shortcut. So I'm gonna select them, press Control-Shift-C on the keyboard, and then I'm gonna call this my images comp for now. And I only have the option of moving all attributes into the new composition. We talked about this when we talked about pre-compositing a couple of modules ago. So if you forgot what this window does, I advise you go watch that video again, the video for pre-compositing, which I believe was on module 3 of the course. So with that done, I'm going to click OK. And I don't want to open the new composition because all I want to do is stack up those three things. I don't want to do anything with them yet. So I want to keep that closed. So I don't want to have it open. And by default, this is turned off. I just had it on because that's what we did on that video a module ago. So I'll click OK, and you'll notice that those three images now, those three layers became a composition. They became one single layer. Now that single layer, it's looking at that image's alpha information. When it's below it, it can look up and say, okay, what alpha information is above me? And that information is telling that image comp layer that it can be visible everywhere except where I see the visibility of the alpha channel on that other layer where the letters are. So I now can say, okay, well, if that is the case, can I use that alpha information to create a track matte from you? And that's why I kept on calling this thing. Let me actually rename it. This will be my track matte. And this guy will be the content. So the content is looking up to the track matte. It's always looking up to see what's above it and say, okay, can I use that information? What can I use from you as information for visibility? Right now, by default, as I said, we're seeing it as it was set up. But now I can go ahead and use this drop-down menu to the right of the modes menu. And if you don't have that open, by the way, you can always right-click on the gray area and choose columns, modes, and that will open up that column for you. Or if you have it closed and you are running low in real estate, Remember, you always have this switch down here, or press the F4 key on your keyboard to switch between the switches and the modes. So if you have that open, now you have the track mat available to you. From that track mat, you have 4 specific options. First one is alpha matting, which will make use of the alpha information on the track mat to set visibility to whatever is behind it. You can also do an inverted alpha mat, which will basically do the reverse. Anything but the alpha will be what's visible. Luma mat is based on the light values, so anything that is looking at values going towards white, and the reverse, which is values going towards dark. So it's basically looking at only at the lightness. These two, the Luma refers to lightness in the images. It doesn't have to be black and white. It could be any color depending on how light or dark the colors are. But we usually tend to work, when we're working with mats and we don't have alpha channel information available, we tend to make those images black and white for better control. And we use grayscaling in order to showcase the actual matting. In this case, though, we have alpha information, and so we're going to be using that alpha mat, track mat. So when I click on that, you'll notice that all of my images became visible inside the alpha information of those letters. The difference with this one, though, from the stencil one, is that I can now drag that clouds image and place it below the stack, and my clouds becomes the background, and I still see my images inside my track mat. The beautiful thing about this is that I can, at any time, I can go back and double click on my comp where the images are, and I can set keyframes for this. I can animate them if I want to. So let me open up the position values for this. I'm gonna set keyframes to start right here, and I'm just simply gonna move them around a little bit. I'm gonna move this one here, I'm gonna move this one here, and I'm gonna move this one here, like so. So you actually see some type of motion happening there. When I go back to the original composition where I was working a second ago, which is this one, by the way, this is deceiving. This should not be called stencil alpha. They should be called track mat. By the way, I keep on opening the composition settings by pressing Control K on the keyboard. That's the shortcut. If you don't remember the shortcut, then you can go to composition settings, and then that opens up that same window. You'll notice now that when I play this back here, I see the animation happening inside the letters. So they remain independent from one another, but the alpha information and the track matting setup, it's been maintained. Remember, the content is below the track mat, what contains the alpha channel. So the alpha information is at the top, the content is right below it, and the interaction happens between 2 layers, only between 2 layers. If in this case we have 3 layers inside, and that's why I pre-composed this, because I needed to have all 3 layers into one in order to be able to have this setup. The layer, only one layer to another, can you create track matting. The layer below is the content. The layer above will contain the alpha information or the Luma information if you're using a black and white image to create that Luma mat. So the track matting could be either alpha by using the alpha information, or Luma by using light and dark values to create the exact same effect. So if you were to create something through a filter, for example, and you had grayscale, which we will see when we create clouds and when we create smoke in this program, you will be making use of that track mat information in order the light and dark values to create track mats to something that be what it's being contained or that it's being made visible within that specific piece of footage. This is the process of creating track mats in After Effects.